this one stinks, right? 31-28, the Vikings come into Atlanta, beat the Falcons. We're not their backup quarterback. Their third-string quarterback as Atlanta turned to Taylor Heinicke, and ultimately the Falcons defense could not make a stop at the end of the game. Everyone is calling for Arthur Smith's head. So let's break down this loss, and let's try and really consolidate what went wrong and who's to blame more so than others. Because when you lose 31-28, there's going to be blood on a lot of people's hands. But for me, I look here and I start with the defense. Because yes, the defense made good plays in the first half. They got a safety on Josh Dobbs. But ultimately, the Vikings had to turn to a quarterback who they traded for on Tuesday. It's Sunday. And he drove the length of the field and put up a game-winning touchdown. You had him dead to rights on fourth down. He got the first down with his legs. He was picking you apart in the secondary. I think you start with the defense here. But Arthur Smith, you're on my shit list too, buddy, because I've been one of your biggest supporters. I'm like the crazy guy who has the God love Jesus posters at all the gatherings for Arthur Smith in terms of defending him. But make it make sense when you draft Bijan and Kyle Pitts in the top 10, and Bijan has 11 carries. Like, the math ain't mathin'. You wanted to run it every single play down the stretch, and it did not work because Tyler Allgeier got a touchdown. But still, Bijan is a weapon. He's touching the ball 11 times out of the backfield. That's a problem offensively. And that's on Arthur Smith, right? That goes to coaching right there. When you're the play caller and you get to decide more or less where the ball goes and you've got Bijan in the backfield, him getting 11 carries makes me wonder, is there some bigger issue with Bijan following his very limited performance in the Buccaneers game 2 weeks ago? That is something to monitor. But ultimately, it's the defense for Atlanta that I have been praising and I have been gargling for the first 8 weeks of the season. But Minnesota's offense, 363 yards, that's not Kirk Cousins leading it. That's not Justin Jefferson on the field receiving it. That's who? Josh Dobbs traded on Tuesday, driving down the field, putting up a game-winning touchdown with a little over 20 seconds to go. The Vikings' run game, which had been awful coming into today, 146 yards. But I think the big difference is the turnovers. Both sides exchanged turnovers. But what did Minnesota do with their turnovers? Points. Capitalized on them. Atlanta, nothing. The Falcons' defense, as I kind of went after them, went for their throat, credit to them, they had 2 takeaways. And this one goes to the offense now. This is where the offense gets a little bit of blood on their hands because they had 2 takeaways that did not amount to a whole lot. So you compare the numbers side by side here. But the next question that is on Arthur Smith's desk is, who's going to start a quarterback for you next week in Arizona? You want to roll with Taylor Heinicke, who didn't really get much going until the second half. And you know what? You're making your first start of the year. I think there's a fair amount of slack that should be given in terms of, all right, he might not be on his A game through the first 5 passes, but let's let him cook up a little bit. And he sure did with Jonnu Smith on a huge touchdown pass in the third quarter. But ultimately, I don't know if the offense was truly all that much better with Taylor Heinicke over Desmond Ridder. Sure, you look at 28 and you go, oh, they scored 4 touchdowns. Younghoe Koo had 12 points, right? You had a safety. That's 12 turning to 14. So 14 points came from defense and special teams. 2 touchdowns from the offense, Allgeier and Jonnu Smith. I don't know how much better the offense was with Taylor Heinicke. Now, what we're going to get to next is about what the Atlanta Falcons should do at quarterback moving forward. But really quickly, a word from our friends over at Prize Picks. So now, what is Prize Picks, you're probably asking? It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you can pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. With quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types, Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So for Sunday Night Football, here's who I'm rolling with. Less than for Joe Burrow rushing yards at 12.5. That calf still does not allow him to run, in my opinion. Jamar Chase and Stephon Diggs more combined than 175.5 receiving yards, I have to take the more there. No explanation needed. Joe Mixon, less than 19.5 receiving yards. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. The link for that is in the comments and description of today's video. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Now, let's talk a little bit more about Taylor Heinicke and this offense. 21 for 38, 268 yards, 1 touchdown to Smith, 1 interception, not a good one. Ultimately, the offense was similar in terms of scoring as it was under Desmond Ridder, right? Under Desmond Ridder, this offense was moving the ball down the field, just not capitalizing on red zone trips or turning it over at the opponent's 35, 40-yard line. So it's hard to argue that it's all that much different with Heinicke. At the end of the day, we're not arguing or debating about apples and oranges, right? We're debating about oranges and tangerines. They're different, but they're kind of similar. And Heinicke and Desmond Ridder, one's an orange, one's a tangerine. Like, sure, someone is going to be able to spot the difference, but I don't think one of them gives you a clear and obvious advantage over the other quarterback. So when that's the case, well, usually the next set of the flow chart is, could one quarterback be the future quarterback for you long term, like a rookie or something? Not really the case here. Maybe more so Desmond Ridder, but he's in year 2. He's got a cheap contract, so maybe you want to ride him out the rest of the way. Although once you kind of benched him, which you did bench him, it's tough to just toss him back out there like nothing ever happened. So I think we're going to see a long week of practice and figure out who's the starter on Thursday or Friday. But neither quarterback has done a lot to help this team win, but neither quarterback is also severely handicapping their team when they both turn it over as well. Bijan Robinson. I don't understand what's going wrong here. 11 carries. That's it. If you're committed to the run, which they were, they ran it, that was 12 out of the last 13 plays on offense to go down the field and cap off a nice touchdown drive. Give it to Bijan. Give it more to Bijan. He is a very special talent. If you want to justify using a top 10 pick on a running back, well, you have to follow that up with, we've got big plans in place for him. We're going to force feed him the football. Instead, Bijan is being treated like an RB2. Feed Bijan the rock. And then Jonnu Smith is a better tight end than Kyle Pitts. Right now he is. 5 grabs, 100 yards, 1 touchdown, that 60-yard touchdown. You have Kyle Pitts, the 4th overall pick. Bijan Robinson, also a top 10 pick. And both guys are being out-usaged and outshined by Jonnu Smith and Tyler Allgeier. At some point, you got to go, you know what, Art? I don't know if you think Jonnu's better than Kyle Pitts, but the investment is much higher on Kyle Pitts. And if you're going to lose games, can you at least lose games with our younger players getting the ball? It doesn't make sense to be riding Jonnu Smith into the dirt. And again, he's doing great, so part of me understands the reasoning behind it, but another part of me is like, if you're going to lose, at least lose with a verdict on Kyle Pitts. And at least lose with Bijan justifying being a top 10 draft pick. So who should start in Week 10? In Arizona, Heinicke or Ridder? Let me know who you think the starting quarterback should be for the Atlanta Falcons this Sunday in the desert against the now 1-8 Arizona Cardinals, who just got shut out today in Cleveland. Josh Dobbs now. It's embarrassing. As a defense, you should be embarrassed. Traded on Tuesday. I don't even know if Dobbs is smart. He went to my school, so he knows where Minneapolis is. But the point is, he just learned in the playbook. He comes in relief for Jaron Hall, who leaves the game with a concussion. And he goes 20 for 30 for 158 yards, 2 touchdowns, and did some good things with his legs as well. 7 carries for 66 yards and 1 touchdown. So over 200 yards from the line of scrimmage for Josh Dobbs, 3 touchdowns total, and he doesn't even have the playbook in his head yet. As a defense, that's embarrassing. It was already a little bit dicey and embarrassing when it was 28-24, but to let Dobbs drive down the field like that, that's something the defense should look inwards and go, we're better than that. We have been better than that. And at 4-4 at home, that's a bit of a turning point. Like, there are still a lot of games to be played. We're at the halfway mark. This team is not dead at 4-5. The Buccaneers thankfully lost today. So once again, the division winner might be a 7 or 8 win team. So you're still in the mix of things here. But I was texting some Falcons friends of mine, and there's a legitimate argument of like, hey, if you're going to suck, maybe just really suck. So you could go get Michael Penix or Bo Nix. They're not going to tank, but if Josh Dobbs can be a better quarterback than Taylor Heinicke and Desmond Ridder was today, after learning the playbook on Tuesday and being traded then, really makes you wonder the future at the quarterback position for Atlanta. TJ Hawkinson, by the way, it's not a good thing when your team is used as a trampoline for getting back on track. Hawkinson was looked at as one of the biggest tight end extension busts so far this year. He goes off for 7 grabs and 69 yards. Jordan Addison had a very impressive catch, 5 receptions for 52 yards. Alexander Madison, 2 receptions out of the backfield, 49 yards for 1 touchdown. So ultimately, it was the unusual suspects with Drake London out today with a lower leg injury or a hip injury, whatever it was. Jonnu Smith, 5 grabs, 100 yards, like we said. Kadero Hodge stepped up big, 3 receptions for 60 yards. And Kyle Pitts, it's not like he's just doing cardio out there. 4 grabs, 56 yards. But I just want more of Kyle Pitts and Bijan. We're just all frustrated because if you're going to lose, there's no real losing style, but at least lose with justifying the top 10 selections on Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson by getting them the football. Then it just feels like you're not just losing once to the Vikings, but you're also losing with the future of this team with top 10 draft picks, which have to be base hits. They don't all have to be home runs, but they got to be base hits. And right now, they're not looking like base hits. They're looking like walks at best. So the final score, 31-28. Arthur Smith. I'll leave you guys with this. Is Arthur Smith on the hot seat? Losing seasons coming into this year. 4-5 right now. At what point do you need winning? We're at that point. I'll tell you that. We need wins. And they need them now.